What's up, everyone? This is Corey Porter with Read the Coverage Sports, and today I want to take another conversation look at Gardner Minshew. So everyone probably pretty much remembers Minshew mania here 2 years ago when he was pretty much on top of the world. He was a rookie 6th-round draft pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He came in taking over for an injured Nick Foles and kind of took the league by storm, really. Though, I mean, if you kind of look at his stats, his win-loss record, he wasn't great, but he's playing for Jacksonville. Especially in Jacksonville at a time when they were kind of mass exodus of all the really good defensive talent. But for a team like that, he was a really big bright spot. So there's a lot of questions coming into this season. Me in particular, could Gardner Minshew grow into becoming the franchise quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars? 2020 played out, and that's obviously not the case. He did not have necessarily a great year. Different things, injuries, things like that. Personally, I feel like Jacksonville kind of started tanking pretty early. They saw, okay, here's where we are. They had Doug Marrone, which, let's be for real, he was kind of on just a stopgap year. I think he was on kind of a roll the dice. Hey, if we do really well, great, Doug Marrone's already here. Hey, if we start to slide, great, we're going to probably fire Doug Marrone anyway, so there's no real reason to get a new guy in here to kind of take over and all that kind of stuff. We'll let Doug Marrone kind of be that guy that brings us the really high draft pick and then we'll get rid of him. It's really how I felt with a lot of the year. I did have some optimism, obviously, going into week one. Gardner Minshew and the Jacksonville Jaguars went out and beat the Indianapolis Colts, who were a playoff team, by the way. A real big shock, one of the better teams in the AFC, really, to begin with. A division rival and all that kind of stuff. So there was a little optimism, and then from there, it kind of fell off the rails. I actually don't think they won an additional game after that, which ultimately they've secured the number one pick, or the Trevor Lawrence pick, because everyone knows that's who they're picking, or that's who they should pick. So that kind of leaves a lot of questions on where does Gardner Minshew go from here? What do we do with Gardner Minshew? Does he stay in Jacksonville? Does he go on to greener pastures? Kind of what is he? Who is he moving forward in the NFL from here on out? I have a lot of thoughts on this, to be entirely honest with you. I think, first of all, I just want to look at some stats. I know stats are kind of nerdy, and everyone's got their own opinion on what stats are, what they aren't, what they should be used for, so on and so forth. So just taking a look at Gardner Minshew from his first year. He played in 14 games, started in 12. He had an overall record of 6-6. 60.6 completion percentage, 21 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. 7.0 yards per attempt, so pretty decent there. Moving on into 2020, the off year, games played 9, games started 8. He was 1 and 7, so pretty terrible there. But some interesting things. His completion percentage went up from 60.6 to 66.1. His touchdowns, he had 16 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and his yards per attempt only went down 0.1%, so he went from 7.0 to 6.9. His yards per game went up from 233.6 to 251.0. His quarterback rating went up from a 91.2 to 95.9. Like, across the board, generally speaking, he improved. But Jacksonville did not win, and that's kind of what the knock on him was this year. Like, yeah, your stats have gotten better, just you have improved as a player, but you're not winning any games. And this kind of draws with a lot of the issues with a lot of these guys, especially these young quarterbacks. If Gardner Minshew had been a first-round pick, hell, even maybe a second-round pick, would the narrative be different? Would people look at him differently? And I bring this up because, again, I know people don't like bringing up Baker Mayfield's stats in particular, but I do want to take kind of a look. Just looking at Baker Mayfield's second year, we'll compare it to his first as well. So Baker Mayfield's first year, 2018, games played 14, games started 13. He was 6-7. This is his first year again, by the way. 63.8 completion percentage, 27 touchdowns of 14 interceptions, almost a 50-50 shot there. His yards per attempt, 7.7, and then yards per game, 266.1, with the overall quarterback rating of 93.7. So, again, Baker Mayfield had a pretty fantastic freshman campaign, especially in the latter half of the year whenever he was really kind of dominating people. Moving on into 2019, his second year, last year, also Gardner Minshew's first year in the league. Games started 16, games played 16, 6-10 record. He had a completion percentage of 59.4, so 4 points less. Touchdown interceptions, 22 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. Pretty significant uptick there in interceptions while not even throwing nearly as many touchdowns. Yards per attempt are down from 7.7 to 7.2, and then yards per game went from 266 to 239, and then his rating went down from a 93.7 to 78.8. Now, obviously, he had the whole Freddie Kitchen situation, which that was a disaster. Never should have happened to begin with. But at the same time, he did have guys like Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr., and he had Nick Chubb, and for the second half of the year, he had Kareem Hunt versus I don't even know majority of the names of the receivers for the Jacksonville Jaguars that Gardner Minshew has been throwing to for the last 2 years. They're not terrible, but they're not necessarily big-name guys, especially in the running game. I mean, they traded Leonard Fournette this year before the season even really got kicked off and underway. And so the difference here, and in my previous video on Gardner Minshew, I stated that I think Gardner Minshew is Baker Mayfield, just with a mustache and a 6th-round pick as opposed to number 1 overall. And I think it really draws a lot of interesting parallels of, just because one guy was drafted higher, there's more stakes. Obviously, there's more money. There's way more money investment made into Baker than ever has been or probably ever will be into Gardner. But just looking at their play-wise, they're pretty much the same guy. Gardner went to Washington State. He came out of Eastern Carolina University. He was going to go be a grad assistant at Alabama and then got lured into going and playing for Mike Leach at Washington State. And then you go look at Baker. Now, both of these guys, highly underrated guys coming out of high school. Neither of them were really recruited. Baker, I'm familiar with this because I live in Lubbock, Texas. So I saw Baker whenever he played here at Texas Tech his first year, and I saw all the ups and downs. And when he left and went to Oklahoma and then kind of took the nation by storm there, going on to win the Heisman, playing at Oklahoma, playing with all that big NFL offensive linemen, big NFL wide receivers, all that kind of stuff. You get the point. But I just think it does bring a lot of questions about, would the narrative change? If Baker Mayfield was a 4th, 5th, 6th-round pick, would people give him the patience that? And I know he gets a lot of crap. He gets an absolute ton of crap. A lot of it deserved, in my opinion, but he does get a lot of crap. I'm not saying that people forgive him and he's squeaky clean and all that kind of stuff. He does get a lot of hate, especially in the media, which again I think is somewhat deserved. But if he was his late-round pick, would he still be in Cleveland? Conversely, if Gardner Minshew had been even just a 1st-round pick, I'm not even talking number 1 overall in Jacksonville, would they be drafting? Well, first of all, you'd argue, would they be drafting number 1 overall again if they'd given him really kind of the attention I feel like any quarterback deserves, especially a young one? But, would the tank for Trevor kind of thing be going on? So there's a lot of questions there that I think are really interesting. But anyway, back to the main topic of hand of where do I see Gardner Minshew? Unfortunately, he's going to be riding a clipboard for maybe all of this year. He's a great type of, sit on the bench. You can't really hardly call him a mentor because it's only be going into his 3rd year. So he's not really that savvy veteran that's going to be teaching other people things. He might be okay for a really young guy because he's incredibly intelligent. I think that's really easy to see just by how he plays and how he communicates. Obviously, he's got the persona and all that. But aside from that, the type of offense that he needs, and it's going to be similar to what Baker has in Cleveland. He's going to need an offense that has weapons. Doesn't have to be top tier, top flight weapons, but he's got to have people that he can throw the ball to consistently. That'll catch the ball, catch and score touchdowns. And he's got to have some type of a run game to help him. And then what really hurt Gardner, I think more than anything this year, is that, and this is something that is really a negative towards Gardner, in his 19 games, I think this is a total number, he's yet to score 30 points in a game. That's not the modern NFL. You have to be able to score, not all the time. You don't have to go out there and gunsling it every weekend, but you've got to be able to be capable of scoring. Sometimes in the 30s, you got to be able to have shootouts. between Jacksonville's defense and their offensive weapons and their coaching, really on top of more than anything, that's just not quite happened there for Gardner. So he's going to have to go repair his image a little bit and show that he can sit and hold a clipboard for a year, maybe 2 years, go be an injury relief guy. An ideal place for me, in all honesty, would be somewhere like Minnesota, because while I think he's very similar to a Baker Mayfield, I think he's also very similar to a Case Keenum. And hopefully everyone remembers the type of year Case Keenum had. I think that's one that people should remember for a long time. Regardless of whatever happens else in Case Keenum's career, that year was special. He was special that year. He did special things. And what did he have around him? He had Dalvin Cook, which, to be fair, he didn't have Dalvin Cook the entire year. He was injured majority of that year. But he had Adam Thielen, and he had Stephon Diggs, and then he had a competent defense behind him. So he didn't have to go out there and be the guy that won games week in, week out. So there was times where he was asked, and he was capable more often than not that particular year. But again, getting off that track, going back to Gardner Minshew, I think that's the type of situation he's going to need to go in. He needs to go, like I said, I think Minnesota would be a perfect spot for him. Washington might be an interesting spot because they have a great group of young receivers coming up. Their running game starting to come up. That defense is really stellar back there. They are also in the quarterback hunt, depending on what they're going to do with that whole situation. Chicago may be of interest, depending on what they're going to do with Mitchell Trubisky. And he's always kind of spinning the roulette wheel with Trubisky there, so that could be a good spot for him to look at. Though the receiving talent there is kind of similar to Jacksonville. They're solid, but they're not spectacular. And their running game is, kind of whatever it is. So those are kind of really good opportunities there. Another really good one would be Tampa Bay. I don't see that happening. I think Tom Brady's going to be around for another year or two, and they may be really interested in... I think they're comfortable with Blaine Gabbert being the backup, and I don't think they're necessarily looking to kind of raise up a quarterback. San Francisco could be a decent spot. Teams like that, that's where he wants to go. Teams that have talent around him. Houston Texans could potentially be a spot. They have some talent on the receiving corps as well. That defense could get a kind of a boost of energy. It really kind of depends on how this next year going to go with the new coach and everything like that. But long story short, I 100% believe, and I do think that Gardner Minshew is going to get opportunities in the NFL. He may end up just being a career backup, unfortunately, and we're going to have the 1 year of Minshew mania where he was really just kind of everywhere, and he was the dude, and he really was for a good 6 months or so. He really kind of lifted the spirits up there in Jacksonville, and it was fun to watch because that team's been, I think they've had a losing record 9 of the last 10 years, and the only year was that one magic year where they were a couple plays away from going to the Super Bowl, losing to New England Patriots with Blake Bortles. Speaking of which, St. Louis Rams will probably be another really good spot for Gardner Minshew to go be a backup at. I think they could use a quality backup there. But anyway, yeah, I do think he has a place. I think he deserves a spot, but it's going to be holding a clipboard for probably the perceivable future unless something happens. Hopefully he'll get that opportunity again because I think he's really exciting to watch. I think that's the kind of, his story is kind of the one you like having in the NFL, this guy that really came from nothing, that kind of rose up the ranks, and he was exciting. And I hope Minshew Mania is not over. I hope the mustache doesn't go away and then we'll never think about it again unless we kind of like look back in the pages of NFL history. But anyway, that's my thoughts, and we will see y'all next time.